right, good afternoon, y'all. I am really encouraged to see so many people in attendance here. You know, a couple months ago, whenever we got the news that the Kids Count report had been released, I was immediately pulled into a text message group and then an email thread with just the devastating news that our community, our county, was at the bottom. And that's a place that we certainly don't want to be and certainly don't want to stay. So I just want to reiterate what was shared earlier, that today is just a starting point. You know, it's not enough just to be here. It's not enough to just talk about these things. We have to act. We have to do policy change. We have to invest as individuals and organizations with our money and our time. And we have to collaborate. That's probably the biggest thing right now, is let's identify the gaps and overcome those. So I'm really thankful to be surrounded by people who are committed to action on this panel today. So I'm going to read their bios, and then we'll have a great discussion. So I'm going to start off with Miss Regina Henning. Regina Henning works for the Child Care Resource and Referral Network as an early language and literacy specialist for the state of Tennessee. She has been with CCR&R, and she also worked as a family engagement quality coach, where she worked directly with child care educators and families in the community. She is a certified trainer for building strong brains, strengthening families' protective factors, conscious discipline, and the pyramid model. Before her work in early education, she worked with children and families in the child welfare system. She has a passion for early education and preventing adverse childhood experiences. She has served in various capacities for over 15 years to help children and families across Tennessee. Regina currently serves on the executive board for Southwest Council on Children and Youth and holds a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's degree in teaching. Thank you. Then Ms. Catherine Cawthorn, Program Manager for West Tennessee Child Care Resource and Referral Network of West Tennessee Healthcare and Therapy and Learning Center. She has 35 plus years in the field of early care and education, along with health components. She's worked as a caregiver, Montessori educator, children's ministry director, adjunct instructor, and center director prior to starting this grant program 21 years ago that serves the 20 southwest and northwest counties in West Tennessee. Then we have Miss Danielle Barbie. Danielle Barbie is the wife of Preston Barbie, the mother of one-year-old Presley Barbie, and the owner of the Math Success Coach, LLC. After teaching high school math for 5 years in the Madison County school system, she decided to start her own tutoring company to help students close achievement gaps and meet their academic goals. With over 11 years of tutoring experience, Danielle has successfully helped several students achieve their academic goals from elementary all the way to the collegiate level. Danielle also works as a cost analyst for the Missile Defense Agency. I don't think we have Pastor Watson. Oh, okay. Perfect timing, perfect entrance, Pastor. So we have Pastor William Watson, currently serves as a visionary shepherd and compassionate pastor of historic First Baptist Church in Jackson, Tennessee. His innovative leadership style has been demonstrated through facility renovations, increased membership, a weekly radio broadcast, and the annual Praise in the Park worship with the City of Jackson. When not in the pulpit, Pastor Watson is actively engaged in civic activities in Jackson and Memphis. He is a sought-after speaker at revivals, conferences, workshops, nationally and internationally. He also speaks in both local school systems and collegiate functions. And we have Mr. Mark Reed. Mark has worked for the Jackson Housing Authority for 31 years. He began as a management assistant, then assumed the role of sector coordinator, then director of asset management, and finally to executive deputy director. As director of asset management, he helped coordinate JHA's transition to manage the low-income housing tax credit properties in Jackson, Tennessee. To date, JHA currently manages 493 low-income housing tax credit units throughout the city of Jackson, in addition to its public housing, and has increased funding the Jackson community by $2 million additional annually for the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Mr. Reed has worked successfully on rehabbing several properties, and his focus remains on working to bring more affordable housing to the moderate low-income residents of Jackson. Mr. Reed is passionate about housing, challenging the staff of Jackson Housing Authority to grow and provide excellent customer service to every client. And lastly, we have the force that is Miss Trunetta Atwater. She is a photographer, coach, and visual storyteller. Founder of Trunetta Atwater Photography and the Soul Collective, an entrepreneurial incubator focused on elevating the arts, cultural, knowledge, and wellness of Black business. She specializes in challenging entrepreneurs to bring their creative ideas to life through photography and education. Her philosophy is to empower creatives to be fearless in their business, to be real with their audiences, and to maximize opportunities to promote their products and services. She believes creative businesses thrive as a tribe, and it's her passion to lead entrepreneurs to their full potential through community networking, collaboration, education, and expressive photography. She's been in business for over 13 years and is a finance graduate of the University of Memphis, go Tigers, and an MBA graduate of Union University. All right, my panelists. So the first question is up for grabs for anyone, and it is, Madison County ranks 95 out of 95 counties in the most recent Kids Count report. From your experience and perspective, how did we get here? Whoever wants to take it.
How y'all doing? Just go down the line? Or?
However y'all want to
okay.
About it.
Well, I'll tackle just one thing that came to mind for me is how did we get here? Just in my 30 some odd years of being in Jackson, just the transformation of how we've gone from, a segment of a county that was pretty confined to spreading, over probably 51 miles in the county with the growth. But I don't see that in these 30 some odd years that the resources have kept up with the growth. So I think that my opinion is that's one way that we've gotten to this point.
And I'll kind of piggyback on what Kathy said. When reflecting on this question, obviously we didn't get here overnight, and it's going to take time to overcome. But at the same time, what we know about successful communities and healthy economies is they're built on a foundation of very strong, healthy child development. And I don't believe we've had the focus that we truly need for our most vulnerable, our youngest learners. So I think when we begin to look at how can we shift, how can we grow supports, and how can we shift to focus supports for our youngest learners, then we can start to overcome some of our obstacles.
I guess I sort of kind of reiterate what's been said all day. And one thing for me is the family. And I'm speaking more from a perspective from the low-income families that I see, the family unit and the support of the family. Again, I think Sabrina with the Boys and Girls Club said it best, the grandparents, the parents, the aunts, the uncles, the church, and agencies and everybody around. Seems like the village has let the children down. Yes. Everybody need to come back together and we need to invest in our children. We can never invest enough. I say invest in education, because if we don't, we'll pay the price later, okay? I just heard on the news yesterday, they was talking about messing with my Social Security. I really tuned in then, because I expect these children to pay in so I can get something out. So again, I think it's the family and the economic disparities in this city, okay?
And just to piggyback, the village is very important, and I see the reason why we are here is because the village is missing. And part of that, from my experience in education, is because people get upset when we say things to each other's kids, and we don't have that anymore. And so now it's like, well, can't say anything to them because, and so we kind of need that support back, and kids need consistency. And they don't have that consistent support anymore.
I'd like to add that I think that it's a power and control tug of war. For a long time, things have been done a certain way, and when new ideas are presented, it's completely shut down. It's like, nope, that's not going to work. So I think that we have to be more open-minded about listening to our needs, especially in the areas where there's disparities, particularly in the Black community and with people of color, because we have cultural needs that are not being addressed. And so when people who don't look like us are empowered, they're making these decisions that don't culturally fit what we need to fix our communities, then we're still stuck. And that's why these numbers are the way they are. It bothered me to look at mental health and mass incarceration and all those things, because those things affect my family personally. I'm from Lexington, Tennessee, which is a predominantly white town, so when I have conversations with people I went to high school with, and they're like, Trinetta, why are you so angry? And I'm like, I'm not angry. I'm passionate about fixing what's wrong with my community. And if you can't understand that, you don't want to fix it. So we have got to get to a point to where we're listening to what the needs really are and quit patching things up.
Thank you. Let me say I apologize for being late. I was actually speaking to the children of the Jackson-Madison County School System at a function at North Parkway. And as I spoke with them, what resonated with me coming here is not only that the village has diminished or decreased, is that we have not also recognized that there is and needs to be a new image of the village that must emerge, because we are not the same. Our thoughts, our dynamics are not the same. The village that we came up in, and I'm 46, the village that we came up in was a close-knit community based on the struggles that were going on at that time. And so the village responded to the struggles in such a way that the child could be assured, reassured, affirmed, and confirmed. Now that the struggles are similar but not the same, because we often say we know what you're going through, and as I said and talked with the children today, I don't know what they're going through, because I didn't have to wrestle with social media. If I had a bully, we were right there in the same classroom, and we dealt with it right then, and we moved on. Right now, you have bullies that bully from a distance, across waters, and behind all types of whatever those technological terms are, because I'm not on social media. And so we have to reshape, restructure, and rethink the village that we talk about and that we lost in order to be more effective in this time. And so it does hurt my heart as well as we look at this present number of 95. And I'm a transplant to Jackson from Memphis, Tennessee. And so it's a struggle for me coming in to see children in the climate and in the culture that we're in, facing rhetoric that diminishes our opportunity to even invest because of how we're being either misread, misunderstood, or misappreciated. And so until we find what is, I believe, common ground, and that common ground must be one that all of us are individually, uniquely, colorfully made in the image of God. Number two, until we find common ground that suggests that I deserve, just as you deserve, a space wonderfully in this economical, socially economical, physically beautiful world that God has created. And three, until we understand that our diversity is what will bring about true unity, we'll never successfully defeat the enemy that stands before us.
Can I say one more thing? When we talk about the economic well-being, I made one note for Jackson, Madison County, the median income being at $47,000.
You're anticipating my next question. Keep going.
580, okay? And I look at the percentage of people of color. I'm gonna use where I work, 733 families in public housing. 68% of them are at the 30%, the lowest poverty level. And I think one of the ladies spoke earlier when I came in. She was one of the first speakers. She said this: if a problem exists, we all need to address it, because we all got to live here together, you know. And when I look at this and I see 68% at 30% of the median income, that's poverty, way below the federal level at $25,000 for four. And then I say that along with poverty come everything else that we're going to talk about on the stage. Okay, but that just sets the stage for conversation.
So as Mark has indicated, we can't talk about the village without explaining who's in the village and what resources the village have, right? So my next question for Pastor Watson and for Mr. Mark Reed. The highest ranked counties in the most recent Kids Count data were all counties with the highest median income. One might assume that the rankings are directly correlated to wealth, but Madison County's numbers are a little more complicated. Our median household income was $47,580, which ranked near the middle of the pack. However, we have one of the highest child poverty rates at 32.3%. What other factors do we need to consider as we make sense of our county's economic well-being, such as race, wealth segregation, et cetera?
I'm going to go before my pastor, who is so intelligent, go. He's a great teacher. I love it. The one thing for me was the divorce rate, the number of single families in Madison County. The divorce rate is high, highest in the state. Then you look at 47,500 being the median income. You take away one of them, guess where they are? In poverty. So it's in. And then, when you look at median income, it sometimes it can distort the data, because the median income, sometimes they knock off, in hood public housing, when they do an average, they knock off the bottom of the tier, and they knock off the top and get the median income, okay? And I say that to say this: Jackson got too many at the bottom. So if you want the true picture, let's get the whole thing.
Well, I was sitting here reading the question again, since Mark set me up to be intelligent so that I could intelligently respond to the question. And as we look at that number of our median household income was $47,580, which ranked near the middle of the pack. As I would piggyback off of what Mark has shared, what pack are we talking about? What statistical dynamic makes up this medium income, this pack? Is it a socio-diverse pack, or is it a pack that's based on a specific group of people, a certain ratio? That would be my first question. And then even looking at, when we talk about the poverty rate, as Brother Reed just shared, $47,580 is the median household income. I don't know of any family, especially in our present inflation state, that can function off of $47,580, especially if they have more than one child and another spouse in the house. And so that's a difficult, as you shared on here, complicated number to unpack. And it says, what other factors do we need to consider as we make sense of our country's economic well-being? You said race, wealth, and segregation. Race is first, yes. It is no secret, it is no quiet behind-the-door activity anymore. It is an often swept under the rug conversation, because we have even people of white and black status who share that we live in the most diverse and wealthy country in the world for some. It's not for all. We live in the land of the free and the home of the brave for some, not for all. And until we address the for all, the equity of the conversation that we put in print, we will struggle with this top to bottom, bottom to top diversity. And again, what bothers me most is when people like to tout these terms via all of the other platforms, conservative, liberal. And the truth of the matter is, all of us are conservative at times and liberal at times. We determine what we want to be conservative about and liberal about. We determine how we want to treat, and if we're going to tout the present leak and structure of our community when we talk about race and we're talking about caring for children, my question then comes to every party: which children are you talking about? Because if we're highly concerned about the child in the womb, why are we ignorant about the child that's already in the seat? And so that's a tension for me, that you'll pass a quick bill to divest women of power and men and families of their own decision, and then we equate it to God want us to make. God ain't never told you to make no law to govern nobody else's house in such a way that takes away the opportunity to understand the structure from which it came. You make sensible decisions within your home. And if I decide to follow that prompting, that's based upon my heart's transformation, but I don't need to legalize your heart. I need to give you a transformative agent who is the person of the Holy Spirit who will deal with your heart. Because, again, as we see, it divests us and changes us and transforms us. So, again, when you talk about these numbers and you talk about what we're looking at and we're wrestling with, it's a heart issue. And until we deal with a heart issue, no law can legislate my heart. I have to either deal with a transformed heart and agree to transform my heart, or I'm going to choose to stay on the other side and act ignorant of those things that I know are creating an issue in the life of, as Trinetta said, a community that I'm choosing to overlook. That's why I hate it, and I say the word hate too. I hate it when people say, I don't look at your color. Why not? I look at yours. That's the beauty of who we are. To not look at your color and not look at what we're dealing with is to say that God does not make us intentional about the concerns of another. So as we wrestle with these numbers, I think we need to be more intentional about saying, hey, let's include every number, even the numbers we don't like, because it's not up to us to rewrite history to fit our mold. It's up to us to take everything, the good and the bad, and make this life great for everybody.
Yes.
I'd like to add to that just a little bit, just from a different perspective of wealth. Read that question for me again. What other factors do we need to consider as we make sense of the county's economic well-being, and wealth being one of them? I know we're talking a lot about the kids, but let's talk about the generation before the kids. In Jackson, I think our 2020 census is like 42% black, right? I don't know if you know this, but like black women are the leaders when it comes to being highly educated in this country. Black women are also the leaders when it comes to starting businesses. And do you want to know why? Because we can't get corporate jobs that even pay us what we thought we should have done. Go to school, get this education so you get a great job, you take care of your family. And then most of these women, like you said, they're in a single family home trying to take care of their kids, but the wealth still isn't there. So when you've done all of the right things, I'm one of them. Luckily, I got a husband that takes care of my household. But like, I'm about to be 40, and nobody has offered me a job. That's how I became an entrepreneur. I had to figure it out. And so when my parents spend $100,000, well, I'm gonna say they signed me up for $100,000 because I still owe the people. You know, it's heartbreaking because you're just like, I just want to do a good job. I want to be successful. I want to grow this company. I want to be great. And then when you get into these positions, you are faced with microaggressions. When I did early on in my career, I was in the financial services industry. Every time I had a problem, it came from a white woman because they felt like they should have been in my position. And eventually you get tired of going to work and you're just like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I literally rolled out of bed one morning and I told my husband, I'm not going back. I can't. Because if I'm being treated unfair because I want to do a good job for other people to make this company better, to grow this company, and I'm here to tell you and to be unapologetic about the things that this is what we're facing. And then we send our kids to school and they're getting the bottom of the totem pole. And you know, I'm an advocate for my kid, and I'll get to that when it's time for me to answer my question. But this is why we're still at the bottom. because nobody's listening. And at what point is somebody going to listen?
So when we have a discussion about wealth, we can't talk about wealth without talking about housing. You know, most of us, our wealth is in the real estate that we own. And you know, earlier I was struck whenever we consider somebody cost burdened, that means that they're paying 30% of their income or more to housing costs. And I was struck by the fact that there are many Tennesseans that are paying 50% or more. So I'm going to pass this question to Mark. We hear a lot about the need for more affordable housing in our area. What is your assessment of the problem, and what are some steps we can take to lower the burden of housing costs on our families?
First of all, you answered it. Too many, over 50% of the people are cost burdened with rent here in the Madison County. Number one is affordable housing. I talk about it all the time because number one, the supply is low. It's too low here in Jackson, Tennessee. The demand is high, too high not to be addressed. We're not talking about affordable housing. I'm not talking about public housing. I'm talking about people exiting public housing. I have people in Lincoln Court that are paying today $600-700 a month because they can't take the leap to go out, because the next leap is $12,000 to $13,000. All I'm saying is this: think about this. People exiting from this school, from Lane College, young educators, can they afford to come out of college? I think you're talking about with your student debt, and go out and buy a house, rent a house here, affordable housing in this city. So affordable housing is so important because we need to keep talent here in Jackson. The second thing is we create other problems when we don't have affordable housing. You have two families living together, and not that they want to, they're made to. You have children, two sets of children with two sets of parents, two mothers in the house, and we're just creating problems. And it's tension. And we're just talking about ACEs. Hey, we got a problem there, okay? That's stressful. You know, with the public housing here, I hear people all the time come back after they've been evicted. I'm going to do right this time. Because they find out when you're moving in with somebody else, this your friend, or even your sister or your brother, that is pretty difficult. And so you need your own space. You want your child to have their own space. You want your child to be your child. You want your child to have a place to call home. And then as for you all and myself, during the pandemic, I learned how impatient we all are. We all had to wait a little longer at Burger King. We all had to wait for these services because a lot of people that need these affordable homes, they quit. Now, there is a city that we all know, and I was in a housing conference about a month ago, and at the housing conference, it's so amazing that they did not bring up the topic, but the news did that night while I was sitting there watching their news. And it was the people that's needing affordable homes, these people sitting on these jobs at your Burger Kings, at your hospitals, and they're not the nurses. They were deciding to quit their jobs in this city because there was not enough affordable housing in this city, and the city acted like they didn't care about it not being enough. So they said this: we're not going to be driving into your city. It costs us too much. Then we're penalized because we cannot pick up our children from the daycares on time. So if you want our services, you want us to be employed in your cities at these jobs that you all do not want, you all need to give us affordable housing. And now that city is faced with a problem. And I'm saying, Jackson, we need to be in front of the ball, not behind the ball. Okay. Now, the second part of that was what are some steps we can take? Number one, we're going to build more affordable housing. I'm going to hold myself accountable to that myself. I mean, that is my talk every week with my HUD rep, also with an organization that I'm in that advocate for housing and across the state, as well as in D.C. Also, the next thing we need to do is employment. We have more job training fairs at the Housing Authority in the last 2 years. because we need to close the gap. We need to make sure that our people get up and go to work, and not only that, be able to get out of public housing, okay, to go and get this affordable housing. But if they can't dream, or if it looks like it's just not enough affordable housing, it sort of like kills their dream, okay? Because they think like, I gotta be a doctor to live here. You know, I gotta be making $100,000 just to live here. And so some people give up so easy. And you looking at the background is everybody that stayed here, of what they had to come up through, so. Mhm. Yeah, they got, you know, I tell all the kids, you got to dream. You got to dream. And I'm going to say this. I'm a 1968 child. And we didn't get running water. And nobody believes this when they come into my office. Until I was 6. We did not get an indoor toilet till I was 6. You know, and you know, and I appreciate that, because to me, I feel what some of them they do have indoor toilets, okay? But they're going through something different than I did. But it makes me more passionate about just giving people just the basic that they need, that they're really entitled to as children.
All right, so we can't have a conversation about economic impact without also talking about education. So this next question is for Ms. Danielle. Madison County ranks 92 out of 95 counties in the education category. And I know that there are some nuances with how testing is done and proficiencies and things like that. But you know, considering that of our students 3rd through 8th grade, only 14.9% test proficient in reading and only 9.8% test proficient in math. From your experience as an educator, what are some of the underlying reasons for such low scores, and what tangible and immediate steps can the district take to improve?
So a lot of people want to say at first, oh, the pandemic. Well, a significant amount of students were struggling before then. Like, students are graduating that can't read. And so they get jobs and they can't count money, you know, do simple things. And then when the pandemic came along, they virtual learning and parents trying to teach their kids and work, that didn't help. And then certain curriculums being introduced, we kind of just moved away from the simplicity of what students need to learn to survive and thrive in the real world, whether they're going to college, workforce, trade school, whatever they're doing. Simple things as reading and writing in the classroom, in all classrooms. Some of the best school systems that I've seen, students are writing and reading in all classes, even math classes, calculus classes. They're reading articles and doing such things. Teachers are mentally drained. They are overworked and underpaid, which trickles down to the students. And the education system is treated like the low end of the totem pole. So that's how the kids are performing. You know, you hear other countries, they treat their teachers like the best thing ever. They give them good pay, they give them training, and you can require more of teachers if you compensate them more. But what's happening is, and this is just from my experience, because I used to be a teacher, and I left because I was mentally drained. I went to work, and the principal was like, you're gonna have to do all of these extra things on top of what I was already doing. And I was like, I can't, like, I don't have the mental or physical capacity to handle anymore. And that has been a problem for a while. Some immediate solutions that I suggest, just from my experience again, and I'm a tutor now, I own a tutoring company, so I hear things from all, from all aspects, perspectives rather. Students come in and they're like, well, I asked my teacher a question today and she caught an attitude with me. She was really rude. She was like, well, can you Google something? They tell me these things. And I tell them, I'm like, well, because I know how it is being a teacher. I'm like, well, just tell her, have a nice day. I hope you have a better day, because it's not you, it's them. They're highly stressed. And so things like that are happening, and students are shutting down. Some immediate solutions, I would say, especially as far as the reading and math proficiency scores, the district needs an intervention plan. So some sort of plan where either teachers can implement in their classrooms, which there is a way to do that within the time frame, because it's best that you meet the students where they are versus teaching content just to get it in before the end of the year. You can take a kid further if you meet them where they are, figure out the gaps and close them. Then they can learn all of the topics, quicker than you just going through the information. At the higher level, high school, they need to spend more time in their math classes and English classes, whatever classes that they are being tested in. And again, these are immediate solutions. Students need to spend more time in those classes, going every day. I know when I taught before, I had my students for a whole year, so that way I could do intervention in between and teach my lessons at the same time. And reading and writing needs to be implemented in all classes, even math. Students need to know how to become independent learners, because when they get to college, the professors are not about to, some of them will come in class and talk to you about whatever they want to talk to you about, but they expect you to pass their test on Friday. And so students need to know how do I read a math textbook? How do I go through, how is it structured? What should I expect if I have to study on my own and be successful? And it's the same thing on the job. When I started my job with the Missile Defense Agency, they set a manual in front of me and said, read through this, these are the steps. If I ask a question in a meeting now, somebody says, well, that's in the manual if you want to read it. So these are skills that students need, like I said, to survive and thrive in the real world. And the last thing, we need to provide support for teachers, mental health support. Their jobs need to be simple. They shouldn't have to wake up every day and like, oh Lord, I gotta go to work again. I gotta do 100 million thousand things. And you can do that by, coming up with things simple as uniform curriculums across the district, ones that work, ones that parents and the community can get behind, can understand, and support. And for example, there's a school system, I lived in Alabama for a while, and a lot of the students that came in to me for tutoring, they went to different schools, but they all came in and was like, okay, I don't understand indicator 1. I'm good with 2 and 3, but I need help studying these indicators. And I was like, indicators? And all the students knew it. Like, parents knew it when they would send me emails, this is what we're studying, and everybody was on board. They need the community support and the parental support, but you have to give people things that they understand, or else they're gonna be mad and complain, and unless they specialize in certain things, they're not gonna have a solution for it. So we have to find something where everybody can get on board with it, they can support it, and having a conversation with kids to let them know what's going on. That's what worked in my class. I set each student down, I was like, here's where you are. You are red in this area, you're green in this area, but you're red here. And this is what we're gonna work on to help you be successful and close that gap. And they were like, cool. And my students would come in, they knew what they were working on. They could tell you what they knew, what they didn't know. They could ask questions based on, the areas where they needed help. And so I think a lot of times we also are scared to have, I think we've said that before at some point today, real conversations with students. Let them know what's going on. Let them have some skin in the game too, so that they can be motivated.
All right, so as we talked about, data only paints one part of the picture. It's important. These scores and these numbers are important, but I think it's really important to also get stories. So Trinetta, this question's for you. You have a 7th grader in the Madison County school system. Could you paint a one-dimensional picture for us, maybe what the system and community is like and your experience raising a family in Madison County? The good, the bad, the potential, and then I've got one more follow-up question for you.
Okay. So my son, he's going to the 8th grade. He's been in 3 school districts because we moved around to 3 different states. And he's been in 6 schools. 2 of those schools were Jackson, Madison County. So he started out in Jackson, and now we're back in Jackson. So we've been here since the beginning of middle school, 2020 pandemic. The good thing about Jackson is Jackson's small. It's easy to find a community here. It's easy to connect with people, but you have to be proactive. So anytime I've ever been in the school system with him, he started out, you know, you're excited. I was a new parent. My kid's going to school. I'm going to advocate for him at all costs. So I've always been involved since the beginning. I have had bad experience. I had a bad experience. I think it was pre-K. And my son has been reading since before he can really speak, if that makes sense. But he had a hearing issue, so it wasn't always clear. So when he went into pre-K, you know, it was new for him. The classroom was intimidating for him, so his grades were not great. So when I'm having parent-teacher conferences and I'm trying to explain to the teacher his learning style, my expectation was, I'm explaining to you how he learned, so can you adapt to that? And she wasn't willing to do that. And so it was frustrating. So on my part, I'm just like, you know, we'll just do what we need to do at home. And that's what we did. So we go to parent-teacher conferences and had a talk with this teacher. She was like, well, he can't do this. And I'm like, yes, he can. And I look at him and I'm like, Jax, read this. And he reads it. So that was my first insight to like, okay, so it's a communication issue here. So if this is happening with my kid and I'm advocating for my kid, only imagine what it's like when nobody's advocating for the kid. In that same school, I used to volunteer a lot where I'm in the cafeteria. The kids are rowdy early in the morning. There was a attendant, I guess a lunchroom attendant, and she was upset. She was frustrated. Oh my God, these kids are just, they get on my nerves. And I'm just sitting there listening, but my kid was in that audience too. Now, had I not been there, my kid would have been grouped into this category. And so she looks at me and she was like, but your kid is so good. But would you have felt that way about my kid if I was not here? So that's Jackson, Madison County. When I lived in Kentucky, he went to 2 schools. One of them was predominantly black. I walked in, it was in the hood. I was like, my kid, is he gonna be corrupt or bullied? He ended up being bullied, and I knew that. I knew it was gonna happen, because I know my kid. And had a parent-teacher conference with his teacher. He's like, your kid's too smart. Excuse me? You know what I mean? Like, what do you mean? Well, this kid is giving me a run for my money. I can't teach him. Okay, so what am I supposed to do? You know what I mean? So, like, they ended up moving him up to 1st grade. This was kindergarten, so they moved him up to 1st grade reading and math because his kindergarten teacher said that he was too smart. I was like, okay. Then he goes to a better school. We particularly moved to an area of town because I wanted him to go to a particular school after doing research, because Louisville has 108 elementary schools. So trying to navigate through trying to figure out what was gonna be a good fit was cool. We go to the school, it's diverse, there's still not like a lot of black kids, but then he was bullied by white kids this time. And I'm just like, when are we gonna find a situation where he can just be? And so I'm advocating for my kid, but in these environments, I'm seeing where there are so many kids who don't get that same advocacy. And that's a big problem. So we moved to South Carolina. I'm like, we got to find a black school because my kid needs to understand that he is a black boy because he is growing up and the world is different for him. So we found a school. It was really great. He had a black principal. He had a black teacher. And he did amazing in that school. It's cultural. He was able to see it on all levels. He got to see the demographics, social economic levels of kids that looked just like him And so now he's at this age where we can identify where we fit. Because at this school, he wasn't white enough. At this school, he too black, he too bougie. And that's just me being real. So we get back to Jackson Madison County School. We have good teacher. I like the leadership at the school until this year, 7th grade. And I tried to prepare him. Son, 7th grade is a tough grade. And you know, he liking girls now, so he in middle school. Social media, he own a business. My son does a lot. He's very inquisitive. He's very smart. And he's a really great kid. And we get grades back in this class. He's got a C. I'm like, okay, we need to pick it up. We'll work on it next semester. Well, that C turned into a D. I'm like, okay, well, look, we need to do something. And I meet with the teacher the 3rd time because he had an F. I'm like, okay, there's really a problem. And I had already consulted with Danielle because I was trying to figure out how to intervene because something was wrong. And he was just like, Mom, I don't know. Like, she doesn't teach. Like, I ask questions, and my kid asks questions. And he was just like, I can't get an answer, so it just is what it is. So I have a meeting with the teacher. She was like, oh, he's so smart. He asks all the questions. I'm like, bro, he got an F. There's a problem. And so even in that meeting, there was just beating around the bush, like, how can we solve this problem? So I invited my son to that meeting because I needed for all of us to get on the same page. The teacher, me, my son, and my tutor, because we got to get this grade up. And he was like, Mom, she makes me feel stupid. And we got in that classroom, we got in front of that teacher, and he didn't want to talk. She intimidated him. So here I am again, advocating for my kid. And if my kid is feeling this way, how's everybody else's kid feeling? When they don't have the time to go into the classroom, when they're trying to figure out how to keep their kids out of all of the middle school mess, because it's a bunch of middle school mess. When they're trying to figure out how to pay the light bill and rent, how do you advocate? You know what I mean? So like, every situation is different, but as a whole, I really feel like we have to get on the same page. Parents have to want to advocate. If you don't have the time, find somebody that will advocate for you. If you are a teacher, take your job serious. If you are leadership in the school system, listen to your teachers. They're on the front line. They deal with the kids. They deal with the problems. And in leadership, teachers and principals, higher ups, listen to the parents. If you have the opportunity, even it might not be every parent, be proactive in doing that. You know, I would have really had appreciated if that teacher had called me and said, hey, your son got an F. Did I look at Power School? No, because I shouldn't have to because my kid is smart. Like, I have time. Sometimes I don't have time. But like, if I was a teacher that really cared and knowing that this kid is smart, you wouldn't have let it get to this point. That's just how it was when I went to school. You know what I mean? Like, so I just feel like we get to a point to where we get so lazy and we make excuses. But if you can save one kid, that kid may help another kid.
So to follow up on that, another tough question for you around advocacy. Jackson-Madison County School System has the highest rate of suspension for students in the state. Just sit with that for a second. How does that make you feel as a mother to a young black male? What are some alternatives that we should be considering as a community to prevent suspensions?
Stop policing our kids and treat them like they're human. Like, the numbers don't lie. Before I became an entrepreneur, I studied finance. I wanted to own a bank. I understand numbers and money and statistics too. It's one of my favorite things. It bothers me to see black kids, especially boys, in a light to where success for them is only maybe being good at a sport. You know what I'm saying? Like, that bothers me. The numbers don't lie when they say 1 in 3 black men will go to prison. It's a real thing. I'm one of 21 cousins. 9 of us are felons. 9 of us. And I say us because we grew up in that community. We grew up in the tribe. We grew up as brothers and sisters. That bothers me. It also bothers me to know that when we're not teaching how to live in the real world and you live in poverty or you don't have those resources that you need to thrive, you know who wins you over? The streets. The streets are giving these kids an opportunity that nobody else is giving them. You wanna know why? Because I got people in my family that's in prison right now. When the last time you put some money on somebody's books? Because they didn't know how to do anything different. If you get in you'll be surprised what you can get a felony charge for. And once you get labeled, it's over with. That labeling comes with fines that are ridiculous. You can't even pay your bills. How you gonna pay $20,000 in fines? You don't pay your fines, you get violated. You go to jail. Don't have a kid, you don't pay child support, you go to jail. Can't get a job because you're labeled a felon, you go to jail. Why? Because you resort to selling drugs because that's the only option. And then if you get caught selling drugs, depending on what kind of drug you're selling, my brother is doing 26 years for $200 worth of methamphetamine. Help me make that make sense. And if this is happening in my family, it's happening in all of our families. Nobody's talking about it. They're not talking about it because they can't get a seat at the table. They can't talk about it because if they do, they might be working a job that they might get reprimanded about because the truth is coming out. I can't get reprimanded because I created my own job. You know what I mean? Like, so it bothers me. So at what point do we say enough is enough? At what point do we keep talking about these things and actually come up with an action plan to say, you know what? I'm gonna do something for this kid. I'm gonna show him a different way. I'm not gonna let him get attached to the streets. Stop policing them, because you know when you do that, you're telling them that that's what they're going to be. You're telling them that they can't be anybody else but that. And then that's what happens.
So, y'all, we're running a little low on time. I'm going to ask another question real quick to Regina and Kathy about early education, one more for the group, and then if you guys want to submit questions to the app or the browser, I don't really know what you call it, but Slick, is that what it's called? A slide? I don't know. But that they will get you responses to that. I think this is a really good, necessary conversation for our community, and some heavy things that we need to carry. We need to all carry together. So, Regina and Kathy, one thing we don't hear a lot when talking about schools is the impact of early education system on future academic performance. Can you speak to the early care and education system in Madison County and how it is or is not preparing children for future learning, and what else does our community need to consider as it relates to early childhood development?
Do you want me to go first? First, I want to say, you know, the concept that we have that children need to be ready to learn when they walk into the school building, or that we've got to prepare these children ready to learn when they're 5 and 6 is really a dangerous statement, because children are born ready to learn. So first we have to recognize the amount of development that happens in the early years, and how do we support those children and those families so that when they arrive at our school system and our brick and mortar schools, that they are ready to take the next step, not ready to start to learn. And if children are not learning the way we're teaching, we have to change the way we're teaching so that we're teaching the way they learn. We have to see our children as individual children, and we have to meet their needs. It's not easy. It is a complex situation. To individualize care for multiple children in a classroom takes a very skilled educator. If you are tired, if you are stressed out, if you can't pay your rent, if you're being discriminated against, you are not bringing your best self to that classroom each and every day. And that's what our children deserve. They deserve for us to show up and do hard things so that they can have the future that they deserve. And it's going to take all of us in this room, and I'm ashamed actually that the room is not fuller, because there's got to be more people at the table that understand the impacts that our children are going through. It is not the child's responsibility to get it together and figure out how they're going to make their grades work, how they're going to listen to this teacher. You know, it's not a 7 to 8 year old's responsibility to figure out how this educator is teaching him or her so that they can figure out how to learn. It's the fully developed adult in the room's responsibility, and it's our responsibility. We've talked a lot about villages. It takes a village to raise a child, but it takes a healthy village to raise a healthy child. So what we're seeing is a direct impact of what we're teaching them. Children learn through adults modeling for them. So, and I'm an advocate for educators. It is a hard job. But if there's problems in the classroom, we've got to talk to the fully developed adult about how to make changes. You know, in the early care systems, one of the issues that we have to address is suspension. How many people knew that a child at 3 or 2 could get suspended from early care? And they're predominantly black boys. So we have to come to some type of an agreement that black little boys aren't scary, and that we can teach them and they're human, and that we can be connected with them. And the next thing I really want to talk about is the fact that we know how children learn. They have to feel safe, they have to feel connected, and then they're ready to learn. If a child is in their brainstem, going back to brain science, it doesn't matter if you've spent $1 billion on a curriculum, or if you've done every teacher appreciation known to man, that child is not learning. They have got to be in their frontal parts of their brain, and they can only be there if they feel safe and connected. And we're talking a lot about safety in our schools. It's not just, well, we've got police officers, we've got metal detectors. A child has to have felt safety. So it doesn't matter what's in the room with them. They have to feel that the adult in the room is going to take care of them no matter what, and they have to feel connected. You know, working with children that were in the foster care system, I could do every safety plan in the home. I could check every door. I could make sure everything was locked up. But did that child feel safe? No, they didn't even know the people that they were living with. So we've got to get back to basics of taking care of ourselves so that we can take care of our young people. Sorry.
I'm going to add a few things to what Regina said, but kind of more from the research perspective. Many of you have read or heard about the Vanderbilt study on the VPKs in Tennessee and that it didn't have a good outcome. Well, early on, when those were implemented, it was with lottery dollars and then some local funding, and different sources funded those. Well, they were not prepared for early care and education children. They were letting 5th grade teachers move down to pre-K. Well, if you don't have a pre-K through 3rd grade licensure, you really did not take the coursework to know how children learn, develop, and grow. And it's through nurturing, building that foundation like building a house, serve and return like playing the game of tennis, and that air traffic control system that's going on all around them. Other countries, as was mentioned earlier, teachers are the highest paid people. Children do not experience any sit down or sit and get learning until they're 6 or 7 years old because their brain is not ready. In talking about the economic side of early care and education, you were talking about $43,000 being the mean income, and if it drops to 1, well, we're at a crisis there. Early care and education providers make nowhere near $40,000 or even $23,000 if you're working with the youngest of these, birth to 5, out of a system that's funded by a private entity or a local education association. It's a crisis situation. We talk about lack of childcare or access to childcare. Well, it's one, because people are not going into that anymore. So places are closing classrooms because they cannot get people. The regulations are higher than any Department of Education facility. Department of Human Services has extensive licensure requirements for the health, safety, and well-being of children, and rightfully so. But over the past 20 years, they've just gotten more strict and more strict because there has been necessity to do so. So I guess to make children prepared to learn is that it's not a push-down theory that if we learn to read in first grade, well, they could learn it in kindergarten. Well, they learned it in kindergarten. Well, you know what? We can learn it at 5. We can learn it at 4. We can learn it at 3. There's exceptions to every rule. The behavior problems that many are seeing is that the environment's not working for the children. It's not set up for them. Children learn by doing. Just like building a house, if they're constructive, they construct their learning. So they're not playing. There's no difference between daycare, preschool, or any of those. They're all the same. Everybody is learning, getting ready by their interactions with a nurturing, caring, loving caregiver who is on their level, ready to meet them where they are with a hug, an informal, pat, anything that's going to meet their need that day. So many, as we've heard, are sleeping in hotels, coming to a place with nothing to eat. Some are not knowing where they're going to sleep. Some of them don't have a bedtime. I mean, it's just amazing. People in this room might be going, well, that's ridiculous. Well, your child was reared in an environment, or you were, and maybe I was, that your life was kind of the same every day. You got up, you brushed your teeth, you ate breakfast, you went to school, and you did these things. You went home, you got off the bus, you watched TV, you did your homework, ate supper, went to bed. So your life was kind of da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da every day. Well, these children, many of them, not all, by no fault of their own, they may get up one day at 6 o'clock. The next day it might be 10 o'clock. They may be up for 3 hours by themselves. They might eat breakfast. They might go to school at 10 o'clock. Sorry, breakfast was over at 8. You can't have breakfast. You're hungry, so you're irritable. Their lives are da-da-da-da-da-da-da. They don't have any consistent stability. So like we were saying, they're in their brain stem. Executive function, when you're ready to learn, is in the frontal lobes. So the places that are still operational for early care and education are far and few between. People have aged out of going into this business. They're retiring. People are not going into it anymore because there's the adage that you're told, those who can do, those who can't teach. And that's because we're driven by money. We're told to go into an occupation, a profession that you love and feel like you're going to make a difference. But then when it comes to it, you're encouraged to do medical, to do business, to do something else. Or, if you want to be a mother, why don't you be a teacher? Because you'll have the summers off. Not so true anymore. There's barely 8 weeks off, not realizing they have to get 40 hours of professional development in the summer on their own time, many times. So, it's really difficult. So the Vanderbilt study, back to that, said it wasn't preparing children. But now we're switching gears. It's going to take time, but all entities are working towards the same outcome, for all children to learn by doing in an environment that's appropriately set up and designed for their development. And then the key word I've heard in this thread today is experiences. If we can assist children with experiences that we had as young people, possibly, that they're not getting anymore. There's no field trips, so we need to bring experiences to them or find a way to implement some of those things back into the system. In the early 90s, we used to take our children from First Baptist all over the place. We would go to Christmas tree farms. We would go to other farms. We would go take the children to the places they couldn't go. We need to get back to that, or have people within our community coming in, allowing people time off work to give back. That would be very important in preparing our children for school.
Well, y'all, we have taken more time than we were granted, so I want to encourage you to grab these folks afterwards if you have time. They've done a lot of work to prepare for this and have some good ideas for our community, and they are the experts. They're the ones that are acting. And I want to thank y'all for your time and being up here, and I'm going to bring up Matt Marshall to close us out.
Can always count on you, Mark. Well, it's been a long day. It's 2:52, and I'm going to try to get you out by 3, which for those of you who know me, you're saying, yeah, right. But seriously, I don't plan to keep you much longer at all. I hope that you found our time together today informative. It's obviously clear, especially after that last panel, that we have a lot of work to do. But I'm confident because of communities like similar to ours that have figured it out themselves. And I believe there's some models for us to follow. In 1969, the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare named Chattanooga the worst city in the nation for particulate air pollution. As reported back then by NBC, people had to drive with their headlights on all day. You see, Chattanooga had a heavy industrial base and unregulated emissions from industries, railroads, and coal furnaces, which caused high concentrations of particulate matter. This particular report led to a further unwanted designation for that community. Chattanooga became known as the dirtiest city in America. Yet here we sit, several decades later, and that city has now become a mecca of green technology. Over the past decade, it has been voted consistently as one of the best and cleanest cities to live in America. In the 1980s, the city performed a holistic community needs assessment, and its leaders determined to literally clean up its streets. These leaders envisioned what Chattanooga could become, and while it took a generation, they are now beginning to reap those rewards. As many of you know, I am a native Jacksonian, 5th generation even, and I remember visiting Chattanooga often when I was young, played sports, and I go to places like Chattanooga and Murfreesboro and Knoxville and Clarksville, and I always tell people there was nothing, that stood out, that was, too particular, too special about any of those communities. They were all, in my mind, very similar to Jackson. But I also tell people that I go to those same communities now, and as I stroll through their downtowns, I wonder what we missed here in Jackson. What did we miss? We've long prided ourselves on our sense of community. We've often spoke about how we're not Memphis, but even they ranked better than we did in this latest report. These past several weeks, we've seen an escalation in gun violence that spilled over into very public locations, as kids who should be dreaming of their futures have had them snuffed out by other kids who can see no future. I know that these conversations that we've had today aren't easy, but they're necessary. Any good doctor diagnoses the ill and then sets into place a regimen for healing. Because of the hard work of our friends at the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth, the issues have been diagnosed. The results are there in front of you. You have it in your hands. And it's now up to us as a community to change our habits, to adjust our diet, to increase our activity, to listen to the experts, and to whip ourselves back into shape. I believe that we can do it because I believe in Madison County, and I believe in you. But as a person of faith, more importantly, I believe in a God that's able. Proverbs 13:22 says, "A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children." So what will we leave for ours? A community full of hope and opportunity, or a community that they can't wait to get out of? The summit, as Mayor Conger said when we started this morning, is not the end, it's the beginning. And as we prepare to go, we have a few marching orders for you. Number one, get involved. If you're not already, consider investing your time and your resources in making Madison County a better place for all. Volunteer on a nonprofit board, in our schools, as part of an after-school program, or in your church. Support local businesses and consider starting your own. Use your creativity to inspire others through music and the arts. Help make Jackson a destination. Advocate and take action. This is really personal for me. For far too long, West Tennessee has been overlooked and neglected by our Tennessee legislature and our neighbors in Middle and East Tennessee. Over the past several weeks, we've seen grant proposals for TANF funding, a new juvenile court facility, and higher ed workforce development and training expansion rejected. Millions of dollars rejected. We must begin to organize our voices to ensure that our concerns are addressed and that our region receives the resources it so desperately needs. The fact, y'all, that the state is aware of our need, they have these same reports. They have the same data that we've spent all day talking about, and they rejected our appeals and proposals. That, for lack of a better way of putting it, should be infuriating and should drive us to do something about it. But also, help us envision Jackson 2052. What can we begin to do now that will ensure that the Jackson we leave our children and grandchildren will be the type of Jackson that we would all be proud of? Chattanooga, again, set into motion a plan and vision in the 1980s that created the city they have today. We can do the same. We could even do better. These numbers, this 95th ranking, can either serve as a reason for finger pointing and shame or an opportunity for examination and change. I pray that we would react with an attitude indicative of the latter. Along those lines, we'll be also organizing a new initiative called Madison County United, where we'll seek to more deeply analyze the issues that our community faces and develop long-term solutions to address the problems we've discussed today. And we invite you to join us in that process. A few minutes ago, you should have received an email that contains a survey for you to complete in regards to the summit. You will also be able to indicate in that survey how you would like to stay involved moving forward. Action groups are going to be formed according to the 4 areas of focus we've discussed today: health, education, socioeconomic, family, and community. And our plan is for these groups to be a gateway to committees that already exist in Madison County. Notice I said a gateway to committees, not creating new committees. A gateway such as committees like the Anti-Poverty Task Force, the Health Council, Bright Start West Tennessee Steering Committee, faith-based initiatives, the Knowledge Mobilization Team, etc. There are great people doing excellent work in so many of these areas, but they need your help. How, again, will you make Madison County become all that it can be? I close with these words of inspiration from one of my favorite movie soundtracks. Your prayers don't always happen when you ask, and it's easy to give in to your fears. But when you're blinded by your pain, can't see your way clear through the rain, a small but still resilient voice says, "Help is very near. Oh, there can be miracles when you believe." I want to give a special thanks to all of our sponsors of today's events: the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth, the Child Care Resource and Referral Network, the City of Jackson, the African American Chamber of Commerce, Union University School of Social Work, the Jackson Chamber, West Tennessee Legal Services, the Jackson Equity Project, and West Tennessee Healthcare. I also want to take just a moment to thank our organizing committee. It was led by Olivia Abernathy, who's been up and down and running around all around the stage today. Ms. Lauren Kirk, Kathy Cawthorn, Jerry Moore, Dana Cobb, Dr. Rose Bailey, Regina Henning, and Nicole Newman. And finally, I'd like to thank each and every one of you, because this is your home too. And these are your kids, and these are my kids, and these are our kids. Neither they nor us will ever get this time back. So let's commit to making Madison County the best place in Tennessee to be a kid. Thank you for being here today.